Well, here we go again. Another week, another podcast. Welcome to the Titus and Sergio Variety Hour. I'm Sergio Paradise and he's Titus O'Reilly.
Oh, thank you very much. Now we've got a huge guest.
We do. We've had some big guests on this show, but I think we've outdone ourselves a bit here.
If you don't say so yourself.
If I do say so. Okay, let's get straight into it. Our guest this week, he first came to our attention as a fresh-faced comedian on Channel 7's Full Frontal, which led him to his own Live Tonight show before appearing as Sophie Monk's husband in the much-loved Australian movie The Castle. I think you know who I'm getting at. His breakthrough came, get this, 17 years ago, with his astounding AFI award-winning performance as Mark Brandon Reed in Chopper. Then after losing the tats and regaining his ears, he's gone on to work with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott, Brad Pitt, Daniel Craig, Scarlett Johansson, Dave O'Neill. How did Dave O'Neill get
Stephen
in there?
Curry.
Stephen Curry, Mark Wahlberg, Natalie Portman, Kate Blanchett, Jeffrey Rush and Ricky Gervais. And he's the only bloke in the world who could get the St Kilda Footy Club mentioned in an Adam Sandler movie. He loves the Saints, he loves a fast car, and for some inexplicable reason, he's turned up here on the Variety Hour. Let's make him welcome the one and only Eric Bana.
Oh. Thank you very much. I just have to make one correction there.
I heard where he got that wrong.
Yes. Do you want to take it over?
No, you go.
It's your
Sophie
career.
Lee, not Sophie Monk.
Oh, did I say Sophie Monk?
Yes,
did.
and it's a big difference.
There is a massive difference.
Sophie Monk's listening going,
Sophie Monk.
She was my first screen wife. You had to get it right. It was my first
screen wife. I
first screen
apologise for
wife.
that. Yeah, if Sophie Monk hears this, she'll go, was I in the castle? Now, Eric, we'll get to the movie star bit and some of your history a bit later, but more importantly at the moment, the Saints. How they going? Where do you see them?
We're going okay. Obviously, it was a bit more exciting, about 3 weeks ago than it is now. But I'm very confident. I'm not 100% confident we'll make the finals this year, but I wasn't overly confident at the beginning of the year, more to do with the draw. But I knew we'd be in the mix. So I don't mean to sound defeatist. I'd love us to finish 7th or 8th, and I think we can still do that. Yeah, we're travelling okay. I mean, the game against the Swans was very disappointing.
I heard you're out of the race for Nat Fyfe came up.
Where'd you hear that?
That was on the paper this week, so it's obviously true. One, it's obviously true because it was in the Herald Sun. But I sort of thought it said, St Kilda have announced they're out of the race for Nat Fyfe.
Did we come out and say that?
Well, it was sort of not
or
official.
Did Ross Lyon come out and say it?
No, I think it was not official, but it was like someone, Jay Clark, I think, reported a leak within the club. And I thought, that's about like me saying I'm out of the race to play James Bond next.
I don't believe that.
Well, the thing is, I don't know what to believe anymore. This has really hurt my brain because Perth Breakfast FM radio said he's definitely going to the Saints, and now we've got Herald Sun saying he's not. So they're very credible sources, both of those media outlets.
There's a radio station somewhere on the border that'll have it right.
Yeah, someone will.
Some's 5AA.
We need to go. Yeah, we need to go to a country radio station to get the truth, I think.
Well, see, we're both Melbourne supporters, so we know what it's like to follow a struggling club at best. Now, how did you become a Saints supporter?
I became a Saints supporter through lineage. So my German grandparents were Saints supporters because they lived in St Kilda when they came to Melbourne. My mum, my uncle was a Saints supporter and recruited me very, very, very early. Like earliest memory.
Down at Junction Oval?
Well, actually, we used to do a bit of Paran action as well. But no, it was Moorabbin. Yeah. So Paran was my VFA club and the Saints were my VFL club.
And you grew up in Tullamarine, which I remember you used to say in some of your early stand-up days that you'd tell people that and they'd go, gee, that must be handy.
Yeah, that was one of my opening gags. It actually turned out to be very, I catch a plane every day and then it actually came very handy and I no longer lived in Tullamarine. I should have stayed there. But yes, that was, I was born in Malvern and then we moved out to Tullamarine because Dad worked for Caterpillar, the big American company that was based out there. So yeah, Tullamarine and Essendon Grammar was the school.
And you love to, I said you love a fast car and we'll probably get to that a bit later, but you've always liked the engines and the tinkering?
Yeah, cars and motorbikes is what sort of kept me off the streets as a young fella, and I just love it. Just love it.
Did I read you wanted to become a mechanic? That was one of your...
That's true. I wanted to leave school around year 9 or year 10.
Yeah.
Because, where I was from, there were a few blokes who left school and went off and did trades, and I thought that was a pretty good idea. And Dad, obviously being a Croatian migrant, said, no, that's not going to happen.
You're going to stay at school.
You're going to pursue a much safer occupation.
You're going to
just
get... Yeah. You're going to at least get to year 12 was the deal. So...
Had the acting bug bit by then?
Well, I'd say, like the thought of loving movies and enjoying people's performances was there. But, I always say that the thought that would become a reality was no more real feeling than, going to NASA and knocking on their door and saying you wanted to be an astronaut because you live near the airport. Because back in those days, the only thing we ever heard of actors was people went to NIDA, and that was in Sydney. I'd never been to Sydney.
Right.
So like it was very far-fetched to think that you would end up in the entertainment industry.
Yeah. But Mad Max was the one that got it for you, didn't it? Or
Yeah.
not get it for you, but gave you a fair bit of impetus to...
Yeah, and I
to
think
chase
Mel
it.
Gibson, making it in the States made Australians realise that there was a career, outside of Australia and that people could work internationally. That sort of broke the door down a little bit. But I love character stuff when I was young, So all of that stuff sort of was a bit of a melting pot for me for sure.
Right.
And when you were doing all the start of this and you started to footy all the way through, were you playing footy when you were at Pegs?
Yeah, I was at Essendon Grammar.
Yeah,
playing in the twos. Yeah,
in the twos. Yeah,
in the twos, in the forward lines, and changing in the ruck. I was always the shortest ruckman against some freak of nature who was like 6'6".
Half-forward flanker. Yeah.
But I was unfortunately one of the tallest in my team. In the forward line, and I wanted to play in the wing because I was a bit of a sprinter as a young fella and loved to run. But so I played for Essendon Grammar. Couldn't quite crack the A's. Didn't get along well with the footy coach. But was coached by Ken Fletcher in the twos. Kenny Fletcher.
Right, okay.
Yeah, was my coach.
Who were your heroes at St Kilda as a kid?
Winmar.
Yeah.
Probably my favourite player of all time. But it's going back to Trevor Barker, Greg Burns, Joffa Cunningham, Paul Callery.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the guys that I first saw. Robbie Muir.
Yeah. Mad dog Robbie Muir. I mean, back in that era, even though the Saints, that was, amongst their struggle years, that sort of 80s, I guess, but they always had some great players, the Saints, always. You didn't know them all. Plugger, of course, and then Plugger came along and, Stewie Lowe.
They were great days at Moorabbin. They really were. And actually, I didn't even mind. I was against the Waverley thing, but obviously used to go out there every week and try and find a dry spot. But yeah, that had its own charm towards the end. It takes a while, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You hate every stadium at the beginning. I used to hate Etihad when I first started going there, and now I just want to, put my name on my seat and never give it up.
Yeah.
How often do you get to go now?
Every week for home game. Yeah.
How often are you in Melbourne though, or do you have to travel a bit for work?
Well, I'm here most of the time, so I just travel when I'm shooting and then back home.
You're not like Bill Murray who insists on shooting movies outside of baseball season.
No, but I've only ever once been in a position where I really, really was scared about potentially missing a grand final, and it was the year. It was the year I did Munich, and we got knocked out by Melbourne. Actually, so that would have been
2006, perhaps around
five.
Yeah, it would have
4
been
or
probably
5.
Yeah,
2005, because that was actually I think that was Melbourne's last final series.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
2006 was Neil's last year.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Neil's last year. Yeah, so that's a great film, Munich, by the way. Bring up because I caught that unrelated, not known before you said you were coming on. Caught that on, I don't know if it was on Foxtel or something the other night. I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
I've seen it. It's one of those movies because it's a dark movie. It's not exactly the feel-good movie of the summer, but it's one of those movies. There's a few movies when you're flicking around, it's one of the ones that if it's on, I'll always watch it. And that scene where you're all in a safe house and the two opposing groups show up.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away if people haven't seen it, but it's well worth watching. That was Spielberg, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And I always find if a film has a great director and a great cinematographer, it's very easy to get lured in. Like, I don't like watching my own films, but again, if I'm flicking around, and there's probably 2 or 3, that are shot in such a way, or you've got close friends in the cast that you can't turn it off, and you're like, oh, what's his name? And the thing that happens when you're the actor is you can remember every single thing that happened the morning of the shooring day.
So you don't watch it like a movie anymore.
No, you don't watch it like a movie. You sort of go, I remember, that happening at the hotel before I left, or not being able to get my son out of bed, or, I couldn't get on the phone that night, or, I remember there being a footy game during my lunch break. Or
there was an audio problem, or we did more takes, or...
Is that the same for you when you listen back to podcasts?
Oh, yeah, because I listen back to them, religiously.
You air check yourself?
Oh, yeah.
You never have you?
No, I never listen to them because all I think is, geez, that was ordinary. That was unfunny.
So it's all I listen to.
That's all you do listen to. But there's something about Munich, I reckon, and it's probably that combination you just said, Eric, is the director, Spielberg, and the cinematographer. There seemed when I ran into it just a few weeks ago as well, there seems to be a stillness almost to that movie, if that makes sense. It sort of moves from scene to scene with, I don't know, stillness is probably the only way I can describe it. It doesn't have the Spielbergian.
No, I reckon it lets the
touches of magic.
The story speak for itself a bit more. This is a bit intense for a footy podcast, but anyway,
we're getting a bit serious about here because, as you say, it wasn't exactly the feel-good movie of the summer.
No, but it is a great movie. That was like one of the ones where I was just. There's a few like that I'll watch, not just yours, just generally. I always find myself watching Ronin whenever it's on.
Right.
With De Niro and because I'm like, when's the car chase? Or because that's got the one with the through the streets of Paris is a cracking car
and
chase.
Heat is one I find whenever Heat comes on.
street fighting.
Yeah, it's just
still
cracker.
Holds up.
Absolute cracker.
Yeah, but the other one of yours I saw recently. Because it happened to be on and I knew you were coming on at this stage, was Black Hawk Down again.
Right.
And that's another film, I reckon, of yours where it's just... Because I read that book in like 24 hours with Mark Bowden, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great read.
I was in Guatemala, as you are. This is like 2002 or something. And you know how when I was backpacking and they had the book swaps?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'd picked up some... and you're very limited in your choices. So I think I'd been handed from someone this romance novel and I just read like the first chapter and went, this isn't for me. And just at the next place we got to at Black Hawk Down and Mark Bowden's book. And I read the book in like 20, like just sat there and, on a holiday, but just couldn't.
He's a great writer, Mark.
Yeah.
Really, really.
His Pablo one's
Killing
good
Pablo's
too.
fantastic as well. Yeah, really nice guy. And Ken Nolan did the adaptation of the screenplay and did a fantastic job. And
that was one of your, if not the first sort of big international films.
Yeah, it was. It was the first film I did overseas.
And it's still, just the other week I read somewhere that it's in the top 5 films regarded by ex-US soldiers as the most realistic of depicting battle, what real battle's like.
The thing I like about that movie, even though it's kind of a horrendous story in a way, but it's sort of...
We're going through all the uplifting ones.
It sort of shoots it like it's just you're there and doesn't pass a lot of comment. You kind of don't know. It puts you in a situation where you're not sure who's... It doesn't try and morally make the argument the Americans are in the right or anything. It just shows the battle, basically, and lets you a little bit sort of draw your own conclusions, which I thought the book does very well. It makes you really feel like you actually just...
It was more an account of what happened than anything else. Yeah.
Was that the first time you kind of... At what point when you're sort of in a career like yours, did you go notice... They used to say about for comedians, and you did stand-up and impressions and fast-forward and everything. They used to say if you went on Johnny Carson, the next day you were famous. Like it was... that big a change overnight. Did you ever have that moment in your career where you went from, no one knew who you were to you suddenly getting, noticed it went up a level?
Well, it was weird because it was in 2 phases because it was sort of gradual in Australia, although Full Frontal was, pretty popular. Yeah. So it was kind of a bit more obscure because I was always doing characters. So there was the Australian beat where you suddenly go to a pub and people know who you are.
Yeah.
Early days. And then it was, I guess, the overseas beat. And I think overseas that didn't really happen until after Troy. Troy was the movie that sort of especially in Europe,
Yeah.
was just massive, and that sort of forever changed. Traveling through anywhere in Europe, it was definitely Troy. Hey, Hector. Excuse me, Hector. So yeah, I'd say that was a film for outside of Australia.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Get back to the footy. When you those,
I go as Hector to the footy, by the way.
do you, is that the
Yeah.
when you
Do they still wave you with the security wand as we win the full Hector gear?
I leave the sword at home, just go in the dress.
The loincloth.
when you say you go pretty regularly, so you've ridden the whole wave of emotion with the Saints in your whole life. How much is it? Do you find it weird that it still affects you? Like I find it funny. We're all adults now, and you still get really upset by things.
It's interesting viewing it through my family's viewpoint, because my wife's not into footy at all. She'll come to the occasional game and she'll enjoy sitting on the couch watching it occasionally with me. My kids have zero interest. And for the drawn grand final, they were up in Sydney visiting relatives, and I was there obviously.
Yeah.
And my son was off in a side room, drawing or something, and the rest of the family in Sydney were watching the game. And there was a lot of yelling and screaming. And at the end, my wife went out and my son said, "What happened?" And she said, "It's a draw." And he says, "So what happens now?" She says, "They come back next week and play again." And this is genius. My son said, "What a waste of time." I thought, thank you for the perspective.
And you're like, that's my whole life support.
What a waste of time.
What a waste of time.
So were you at the game, or you were at?
Yeah.
And so what was that like?
I've obviously been present for all of our winning and losing finals and grand finals, except for that series where Melbourne beat us. So that was pretty horrendous. Although I've got to say the Geelong one hurt more.
Yeah.
09 hurt more than 010, which I know sounds weird, but the day after the Geelong game was pretty bleak.
Yeah.
I remember the weather that day, and it was a shocking, howling, windy, rainy, grey morning.
Yeah.
To
Sunday
make you
after
feel
the
even
Geelong.
worse.
Oh, yeah, and it was
It was weird, the 2010, because I was there and never been to a drawn grand final. I mean, the last one was 77, I think. And it's just the most bizarre feeling. And not being, I wasn't a St Kilda or Collingwood supporter, but you just stop and you look and you go, well, how are you supposed to feel now? What happens
well,
now?
you do that
Then,
mental
you're
thing.
back next week. But,
Yeah.
checking your, like I was doing that thing. Once I realised it was drawn, I was like, shit, where am I next week?
Yeah.
Because I knew I had to travel very soon
to do.
after, and luckily it was a week and a half after the grand final. I had a bit of a buffer, so I was able to come back for the repeat. But the thing that was weird about it was the grand final was like a normal grand final when you even though it was Collingwood, you get a sense of all the corporates and all the on the fence supporters. But the week later was like going to a big home and away round.
Yeah.
It was completely different, which was kind of nice in a way. It was lovely, obviously, if you were a Collingwood supporter. But it just felt like a massive home and away game in terms of it was full of true supporters. It was full of...
I've heard that. Others saying
was really
like
different.
There was 50,000 Collingwood and 50,000 St Kilda supporters. It was like the best preliminary final or biggest home and away game you've ever seen, and it was a completely different feeling.
Well, you can go to some I've been lucky to go to a few, for work over the years, and rarely for Melbourne grand finals. And although I do remember the 2001, which was over in the first 10 minutes against Essendon.
Against Essendon, yeah. And 88 against Hawthorn,
rather
I remember
fondly.
that one.
But you go to some and it doesn't have much of a vibe. It is that corporate kind of. I was at and I think if the Giants get in this year, it's going to be interesting. I think you'll be able to buy a bay of tickets.
Is there a part of you that just wants that over and done with?
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. They're due. I mean, you look at them, they were pretty good on Saturday with 10 probably of their best 22 out.
Well, the injury list would be a top 8 side.
Yeah.
Like Deledio and all these.
That's a good point you make, Eric, is that let's just get it out of the way. GWS wins the flag this year, then we can all recalibrate and they've won their flag and they're a part of the AFL now, and now we can all move on.
I actually think for them, this will sound weird. This is, psychological level here, like deep. This is where my brain goes. I think they would be better off winning the flag 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Then I feel like there will be a sense of literally, that's out of the way. And I think for their fan base, I think they're almost better building to not win it too early and to have I don't know, it would mean more to them as a playing group, I think, for them to win in 2020.
And there will be a bit of a backlash if they win it this year, because it'll be, they've had every draft pick.
Well, of course there will be.
Everything.
And they can't argue against that. That's just the way it is.
You're probably right, 2 or 3 years down the track.
The scary thing is they might do both and win
this year. See, that's where I hadn't gone.
That's
what I keep
and 18 and 19 and 20.
I think this will be a big factor in whether people are really annoyed about, especially Victoria, because it's such a, the traditions. I remember going to a couple of the matches last year when the Bulldogs were on the charge in the finals, and I had to do a couple of, pre-game gigs, do some speeches at the grounds, and then I'd stay and watch it. And the Bulldogs kept winning, and it was this real feel-good. And, being a St Kilda supporter and us being Melbourne supporters, we know what it's like as long-term fans, that if the Giants had have knocked out the Bulldogs, considering the Bulldogs went on and won, to have this team that's been around and hadn't won a premiership since 54 get knocked out by a team that is 6 years old and cobbled together and given all these. And that's why I think this year, if the Giants make it into the grand final and beat, say, Geelong, people go, well, Geelong had a lot of success. It's not.
Yeah, right, right.
But if they beat, it's probably not going to happen this year, but if they beat a St Kilda or a Melbourne in the grand final, could you imagine the reaction that here's this? So if they beat Collingwood, say, and there's another scenario that wouldn't happen, people would kind of laugh because Eddie's been so into the Giants. They'd kind of go, oh, well, we always enjoy a Collingwood loss. So,
or Richmond. If they beat Richmond, then jokes are plenty.
But at the same time, I think a lot of people go, Richmond supporters have done it hard for a long time. Yeah. And here's GWS sort of waltz in and get given everything. So
if you're a Victorian and it's Giants versus the Crows... Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where you start to go, well, I can only really win. So
I'll just watch that one from home.
But I think, because I remember when they lost to the Bulldogs last year and got knocked out, I was watching with a couple of people that work at the AFL, and they were beyond relieved.
Right.
Because as much as they want them to be successful and keep building the fans and grow it in Greater Western Sydney.
So they might agree with my theory.
Yeah, well, they're more completely, because they know that there's a sense in the AFL, not amongst everyone, but a lot of different people I've talked to in there, of we did probably over-egg the pudding a bit with the allowances, and if they win, we're going to cop it. It's self-interest from them. It's not like they care about the food, but they're like, so exactly to your point, like if it's 2-3 years from now, they're,
or never.
I reckon, that's right. Which is everyone else's. But I do love when, like, I made a joke for the first couple of years of Gita, and it's not necessarily a good joke, but I enjoyed it because of the reaction it gets. So I'd say on Twitter, great win, it's great. Well, I'd make some joke and it would say, GWS fans weren't happy with that loss, and I know I spoke to both of them. And I did it once, and these two guys on Twitter got stuck into me and both said, we have way more fans than that, but it was just two guys. So I'd spoken about them, and then two guys got stuck. So then I did it again the next week, just because of, it was one of those jokes you do more for you than for anyone else. Same two guys jumped on me and go, you keep saying this, but it's actually, there's way more of us. And I'm like, but it's just you two guys. You're proving my argument. And it went on that for a year. And then one time I did it and a third guy jumped on and just ruined the whole...
The room's getting a bit crowded now.
Yeah, that was Gillon McLaughlin.
That was a good win when we beat them this year. Ooh, that was nice.
Yeah, you always take it against those guys. Now, your other sporting passion, driving fast cars, you doing much of that these days?
Not the last couple of years. I had a couple of teammates who got divorces. So...
was that because they were driving fast cars?
Driving fast cars.
Did they consider the impact that would have on your ability to drive?
No, it was quite rude actually. No, I saw. The last couple of years, the category we were racing in has gotten. I'd describe it as ridiculously expensive. So we've sort of taken a little bit of a step away and just get the same kicks, riding a dirt bike out the back of Anglesey. So I don't miss it too much.
You still got the XB? Falcon?
I've still got the Falcon. Yeah, and I still drive that and enjoy that. And as I say, get out on two wheels all the time. So,
but you did the rally car, didn't you? Or
Yeah, did the Targa a couple of times in the Falcon, but yeah, mainly
And
circuit
that's full
racing.
rally for people that don't. That's like rally car racing for people that aren't.
Yes, but on tarmac, so not on dirt,
Yeah,
on a sealed road. Yeah, so you've got a navigator, and it all goes very well until it doesn't.
Which it didn't at one point.
Which it
did
didn't. Yeah, you always say to people, "What's that event like?" I say, "Well, you just got to do it in something you're happy to crash, basically," which is a weird, description of going shopping for a car. But if you do them often enough, it's probably going to happen, and you just got to be prepared to bend them. Yeah.
The thing I always think when I watch rally car racing, and especially in Europe and places where I think the second most crazy people in the world are rally car drivers, and the craziest are the fans that stand on the side of that
or
road.
the navigator. I mean, my best mate was my navigator, and after our last crash, I just went, "Nah, I'm not doing that anymore." I don't mind circuit racing when it's just you and you feel a bit invincible on a circuit because just the reality is it is extremely safe. But racing on a road course is completely different, and having someone next to you, it just sort of got in my head a little bit.
You're the one changing the gears and pushing the
Well,
pedals.
I don't want to be responsible for someone else, So we got lucky with our Targa crash, and I just decided after that I didn't want to do it anymore. So
How bad was your crash? Were you injured at all?
No,
or you're
we
both
got very lucky because we hit the tree head on, which is what you want to do. You don't want to go in side on because that's when people get hurt. So head on's not that I had any choice. I'm not saying
How fast were you going when you hit it?
probably a good 80 clicks into the tree, I reckon, by the time we slowed down and scuttled off the road. It was a sharp sort of downhill.
How long did you know? I mean, it's obviously going to be a matter of split seconds that shit, we're in trouble here. We're going to hit the tree.
As soon as I hit the brakes, I knew
you
were in a lot of trouble. Yeah, There was gravel on the road, which you couldn't really see on approach because it's sort of a bit of a brow. And then as soon as we started to slow down, I knew we were in big trouble.
So it's amazing you can hit a tree at 80 and be okay, isn't it? The safety in these cars.
Yeah.
Airbags and everything?
No. It's just an old Falcon, but it's very well built. I'm proud to say
Pretty
it was a
solid,
well engineered car. So all our safety systems worked well. So anyway.
Now, Eric, on easily the most contentious issue facing the globe today is the deliberate out of bounds rule. What's your theory on this year? Have you been enjoying do you understand the way the umpires are calling this?
I reckon they need to introduce a meterage rule. I know that's kind of too hard, but if someone kicks the ball more than 25 metres and it goes out of bounds, so be it. Because I think, it's tough enough to adjudicate, but, we've seen examples where people have, booted the ball out of the centre to gain an advantage and it's gone off towards the side.
And
I
the
just
shape
think
of the ball,
those
it can go
are
sideways.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or what about one bounce?
Yeah.
If it but I think it's the umpires have got it hard enough as it is.
It's like backyard cricket. One bounce, catch, and you're out.
Was it so bad before? I often, when we get into these situations, I say to myself, was it so broken?
Did it really need to be fixed that badly?
Yeah.
This is like, to me, the greatest example of this is the third man up rule in the ruck. So you have 150 years of Australian rules football where it's not an issue.
Yeah.
No one talks about it. It's never brought up. Yeah. And then suddenly one or two players start doing something. And it was being used by a couple of players and not even that well. And then suddenly the AFL go, we need to change the whole rules of our games.
And how about only nominate if it's a different person than it's been for the last 3.5 quarters?
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, so who's playing again today? Oh, it's Collingwood St Kilda. Okay, just checking. And we're going to bounce the ball. Are we still Collingwood St Kilda? Are we still the same two teams? So, I think the idea of having to nominate at every bounce is completely ridiculous.
Oh, I keep waiting for them to add rules like, you nominate but have to be seconded by another teammate. And then you have to produce your cert 4 in rucking to sort of, it's getting to that point where you're like, we add more bureaucracy? And then Matthew Richardson, we talked about this last week, but he suggested, because they're talking about banning the bounce at the centre thing, having a specialist bouncer come out.
Could you imagine?
I was going to say, do the umpires get to nominate, who's going to...
who's bouncing it this week? But bring out a specialist bouncer. just to add more time and mucking around to the whole thing where they can just throw it up.
See, the deliberate out of bounds, it's a bit like that deliberate rush behind one, which Hawthorn did a few times in that grand final in, was it 2008, I think it was? And that was another one where they overreacted and went, oh, this is going to ruin the entire game. I mean, for a sport that goes from strength to strength, we've had tunnelling, we've had zones, we've had flooding. We've had, this is a game
We've
that
had
they always...
taken the legs out from below
they
the knees.
talk about constantly this sport like it's about to be destroyed overnight.
I don't follow it closely,
sport
but
in the world.
Is there a comparison to NFL? Have NFL played with their rules to the same extent that we have?
Yeah.
Have they really?
Yeah, they do. And the
They've
AFL
tweaked.
go over there on a junket every year. Fact-finding mission and meet with the NFL and talk about it. And the NFL, they love a good tinker.
Right.
Yeah, more so, They're the two probably football codes that tinker the most.
Like football/soccer, I always say depending on what group you want to offend, you can call it either one. And, they haven't really changed a rule in
centuries.
I'm trying to think of the last rule they've really changed.
Oh, they don't need to. It's such a... I mean, I'm not a massive soccer/football fan, but it is such a pure game played in its purest form. It doesn't need all these rule tinkering and what have you. The other one at the moment, though, Eric, where do you stand on jumper punching? All the talk's been against. I'm actually back in favour of it now. I've come right around.
I reckon if you get away with it on the day, so be it.
Yeah, exactly.
A good jumper punch.
Yeah, if you get away with it, if there's no blood drawn or bones broken, I think it's play on.
Yeah, because everyone knows that if you punch someone, but you've got a bit of their jumper, it doesn't hurt. They can't feel it. I always think try this at your workplace.
Yeah,
just go up to your accountant and grab him by the tie.
Well, worse than that,
short, sharp one right
I
under the chin.
punched a cop, but it's obviously
it's all good. What about rotations? Where are you guys at with that?
I think they've probably almost got it right. I do see the other purist argument is that if you lower the number of rotations enormously, it simply means the fittest team will probably play out the last quarter best. But I also understand that the game is now going faster than it ever has. But then that's the chicken and the egg thing. Is it going faster because there's more rotations and the players are fresher for longer?
Well, when they had no rotations, that's when the injuries were happening because players could just go.
That's when your hammies
fast
were
all
being
day,
pinged.
and so and all sorts of injuries were happening. So the cap was to try and do two things: to stop the injuries, and secondly to make it more contested footy again, like marks, and because otherwise the players just ran all day. Like Dane Swan was telling me, he'd sit on the bench for 5 minutes, in a quarter. And it meant the rest of the quarter he could run almost at full pace. Like he just, these guys are, refreshed after a 5 minute sit. They're almost.
So do you think the
even in
AFL likes
quarter.
the ping pong idea?
Yeah, they like the contested marks. They like more players not being able to run all day, to have the the old thing that the tall guys don't get any shorter.
In theory, it sounds good, right? Yeah. Have more scoring and all that sort of stuff, but I don't know if we like the look of uncontested players getting possession out the back on a rebound.
There's a lot more out the back goals than there's ever been, surely. I don't know what the
Well, that's because they're all
are.
trying to do a forward press, and a lot of them are not very good at it.
Yeah, always that.
I think the biggest issue in the AFL at the moment is you look at the Gold Coast. It's just there's too many teams for the talent pool. So it's a bit like Hollywood. A lot of movies get made and you wonder, how did this even get made? How did this person get in it? And it's like, because you can't all go get the best 5 actors or something. And the AFL is spread to the point now where they're not adjusting to the talent pool. They've actually just increased it. So you look at Tom Lynch, who's the best forward probably almost in the comp. He's playing up on the Gold Coast in a team doing nothing. Like if you got rid of them and GWS, if you didn't have them, I'm not saying now we should get rid of them, but if you suddenly went back to having 16 teams, imagine all that talent flooding back across evenly across the other teams. Take the level up amazingly. And that's why now you have teams that are just rubbish, like Brisbane and things, because they just can't have a good... They just can't get anyone good. There's not enough teams.
But there's never really been a general acceptance of the fact that there needs to be 2 shit teams a year. Like there's this kind of ingrained idea that everyone deserves to have a go, but you can't have 18 sides in a competition. And
well, that's where that 17-5 idea that they were floating, and that wild card idea that they floated, that teams the 10th and 9th place would get to have a playoff to try and make it into the top 8 or into the finals.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a bit like everyone gets a...
finisher's medal.
Well, this is what we
Most improved.
This is what we should suggest as another option for the AFL. They've got the wildcard round, they've got the 17/5 round, and Eric Bana's 2 shit teams a year theory, which I reckon has got a lot of merit. Because, I mean, that's always been the case. Going back when you were kids, doesn't matter who was winning the premiership that year, you're guaranteed there's going to be 2 shit teams.
What about this? What about each club nominates their 4 best players and it's a wife swap? Keys in the bowl.
Yeah, there you go.
Beginning of the final series, Fife might end up at Richmond, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Gee, that would make it... See, I've always thought that what they should do for free agency is have it like a Tinder app, so clubs can swipe, right? But players get to choose whether they accept it. Tinder's before my time, really, so, you know, I don't know.
So there's the danger. You go, geez, if I swiped left, I would have got Nat 5, but I swiped right and I got Ty Vickery. Jesus.
I felt for Ty Vickery on the weekend because there was this point... Did you watch that game? Hawthorn scored 3 points in the first half.
Yeah, I watched it. It was
and they were terrible. And so it was Hawthorn's worst half of football ever.
Right.
Or their funniest, depending on who you barrack for. And at one point it was like second quarter and Hawthorn was sitting on a solitary point and Ty Vickery marks it in the 50 with a pretty easy shot. And you're thinking...
Yeah.
Oh, if he misses this, he's not... Anyway, he kicks it behind. And they all booed, the whole fans booed him. And I thought, how harsh has he got it? He just doubled their score and they're still booing him.
He's under the pump a bit.
There must be nothing worse than being a footy player. You know, you've been in the public eye, but imagine being in the public eye but everyone had that view of you. Like, I mean, Cloak was in that... I mean, and we're culprits here. Like, you become a punchline.
Yeah. I can't imagine what it'd be like for those blokes. Can't imagine.
I know it's a whole different ball game, but how do you handle bad reviews, for example?
He's never had any. What are you talking about? Fuck us. Like 5
Three
stars
miles.
on iTunes, Serge.
For every Munich, there's going to be one that probably isn't as highly regarded.
Yeah.
Have you had too many bad reviews in your time?
Well, you always get them. They're always out there. It's just a matter of, you know.
Do you just move on and go, you did your best? And,
kind of irrelevant, really.
Yeah.
No one's that good a reviewer that they're regarded worldwide. So no one really has any effect.
Like a hold on you, you mean?
Yeah. It doesn't really...
Do you even read them, though?
Oh, if
I mean, you're not going to read all of them, but...
No, a lot less than I used to because I don't care really, to be honest. I guess early in your career you read them because you think that they matter.
Yeah.
Or you think they might have some influence on the film and then you realise, well, it's just ridiculous. So, no. And I don't even know anymore what the tomato score is for films that I'm in. I just don't.
I still don't even get that.
You just move on so quick.
But, yeah, just on that, Eric, just going back the early days, like... Let's say Chopper, your breakthrough film, the reviews were just ecstatic and astounding about the film, everything about the film and your performance. How did you react to that?
Oh, I would say that's only partially true. There were a lot of people who didn't like it. I mean, it went on to... Look, here's my rule of thumb. When I say yes to something, I have the 5 to 10 rule. Yeah. How's this going to look in 5 years and how's this going to look in 10 years? I never, ever... make a decision on a film based on how I think it's going to work when it comes out or what are people going to think about it next year. And in a lot of cases, I've been fortunate enough that there's been quite a few of them that have gone on to be better reflected in time than they were at time of release. And nothing gives me greater thrill than someone coming up to me 3 or 4 years after the film's come out. They didn't see it at the time of release for whatever reason. and they see it and it's really surprised them. That's what you're after.
Yeah.
You know, America's more obsessed with opening numbers. We don't care so much here. It's not part of our conversation, but they are very, very affected. Their mood is very affected by the opening number on the box office on the week. It's like a footy score, you know, and we're kind of sheltered here from that. But that sort of thing drives me insane.
Yeah.
And there's been plenty of films where I've had the mood change from week one to week two. So you're in a film that has a great week one and everyone declares it's this amazing success. And if it drops off in the second week, suddenly it's like you're a bad smell. It's
one
like,
wants to talk to
are
you.
we still talking about the same film, or have you guys gone off it because the ratings were bad for the second week? You know, so I always just worry about, you know, do I like the film? Did we achieve what we wanted to? Did we make the film we set out to make? That's it. That's the measure.
Well, that's
and
right.
if you've made the film you set out to make, it kind of makes it impenetrable from my point of view.
And it's such a big collaboration making a film, especially a Hollywood film. It's never just the director and the cast and the cinematographer. It's a massive undertaking that's done. And there used to be an old rule in TV is that nobody sets out to make an ordinary TV show.
But you know what else?
You know?
I don't care if you hate my film.
Yeah.
Like that's okay.
Yeah.
Like there might be a film that I love that you hate, and that's totally fine. So I've always sort of felt that people need to let go of the idea that everything needs to be liked and loved.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
And when you've been happy with your own performance in a film, you move on to the next. And as well as having that attitude about the whole thing.
Yeah. I've always thought that it's, you know, it's your career that you got to focus on. Like being around for a long time is far more important to me than having one smash hit that then, you know, there's plenty of actors out there who've won things and we don't hear from them again, or, you know, they peak early and then they blow up. So my heroes have always been the actors that have been around forever, you know, that are just constantly churned out great work. They may never have been as big as some of their peers, but they're still working.
I reckon that's the thing. Like, I don't know quite what I've been doing this creative thing. Before that, I didn't have a creative job, so and doing it for about 5 years now, and only just been doing it for about a year as a job. So it's on a very small scale, but in a creative sense, the thing I learned doing it as a job, not a hobby, especially writing, is when you work for a living doing that stuff, you've got to do it all the time. So I know a few people who I read their blogs or their articles and they do opinion pieces or whatever, and they might churn out like one every 3 months and they'll churn out a great column, but they've worked on it for 3 months. Like, it's not their job. It's not sustainable. And it's kind of like the people I love who have done creative stuff, whether it's movies, music, you know, art, whatever, is the really good ones get to a point where even their worst is still really good. Like, they actually bring that bottom level of effort, of talent and ability up really high. And I think that's where it gets harder when you must have had times when you're working on something and you feel like you were saying before, you were thinking about what else you had on that day. You must have had days when you were feeling crook or just not in the mood or couldn't be asked.
I had a stretcher on set for a film once. I had a flu, one of those flus where you're like you're
really
you can't
crook,
get out
like
of bed.
true man flu.
A true man flu, and we had a stretcher literally on the set that I would just go.
What film was that?
I don't want to say.
Oh.
And I was literally rolling out of the stretcher. You know,
really?
Yeah, doing a take, going back into the stretcher, and then.
And were they just caking on makeup to make you not look sick?
Oh, it didn't matter for that particular character, I don't think, at the time. So yeah, I don't think it mattered too much. But yeah, I mean, you just you never know. You never know what.
And for all the, I mean, you know, rough moments like that, and as you say, you look back and see and say, oh, that's when my son was crook or whatever. There must be ones, and I reckon I'm just making this assumption, but tell me if I'm right or wrong. I reckon working on special correspondence with Ricky Gervais might have been more fun than it was not.
It was fun. It was ridiculously fun every day. And it's funny you mention it because I'd done, you know, so many dramas for so long that working with Ricky on that film, at the end I was like, oh, I've been missing out on so much fun at work.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Because where was the last comedy before that? You did Funny People?
Funny People,
So,
yeah, which was fun as well, but it was quite a while ago now. And literally, I actually went home from work each day feeling different than I normally do on a film. Like, there's a lot of films I do that are fun, even when they're quite dark. Like, weirdly enough, Munich was a very fun set. I know it sounds completely weird.
It doesn't look fun.
No, but it was just like that was, we had Daniel Craig, we had, Spielberg.
Yeah.
Everyone had a really good sense of humour. And we had a good time, like even when we were in the midst of shooting a lot of dark stuff, because that's just where our head was at. So it doesn't always mean that the lighter films.
Reflection
but you're right. Special correspondence was just nothing but fun.
I've heard Ricky's like that. He's like he is Offset too. Like his mind's just always going.
It'd be a great blooper reel, I reckon.
A few people on
that. Yeah.
Because that was that was Netflix, wasn't it? That was one of the.
Well, not originally. It was being put together. We were just packaging that as an independent comedy, literally, and it was very close to shooting, and they came in and picked it up. So they didn't sort of get the ball rolling, but they came in towards the end and picked it up and put it on.
I reckon what you said earlier about it's all right for everyone not to like your stuff. That's nowhere more true, and you would know this from your early days, especially of comedy, because it's amazing how much one person can find something hilarious and the other person thinks it's just the worst. And even more so, I think, than drama potentially. I mean, I think drama has it, but comedy's so subjective. Do you think do you agree with that?
Definitely. And as you say, with a stand-up background, you sort of, I guess the different thing is when you're doing stand-up, you walk off stage knowing how you've done.
Yeah, it's pretty immediate.
Within reason.
Pretty immediate, isn't it?
You even know what jokes worked and didn't.
Exactly.
When was the last time you did stand-up?
It's a long time ago.
Would you ever do it again? Because now you'd have to do it as Eric Bana. Like, it's kind of a...
It'd be a bit of for people who know you as a film actor. It'd be a bit of like a novelty for you to go back and do that.
Exactly. It'd be weird.
Great idea.
Yeah, the elephant in the room is I don't think I could do it and pretend like I haven't had another career. I think I'd have to do it, be true to who I am and what's gone on the last 20 years. My son cracks it with me that I don't do stand-up because he sees me at home carrying on and ranting and raving, especially when I'm pissed off. And he's like, well, I don't understand why you're not doing stand-up now. Like, I don't get it. I try and explain, well, it's not that simple, but the truth is I do occasionally think about it, but I don't like being on the road. So I like the romance of it, and I am an audience for myself. I'll run ideas from it. I go, that's pretty good, and then I'll move on.
But you could do one or two. You could now do. You wouldn't have to go a big tour. You could do
just do it from home.
Well, you could
just go out in the street one night only.
Just do the open mic in the local one. Show up one night. How many did you do? Like, where was your first gig? Can you remember your first?
I can.
Gig?
My first stand-up gig. Well, my first time I got on stage was at the Castle Hotel in North Melbourne, and then I did a run of stuff early on. Was the Star and Garter in South Melbourne and the Botanical Hotel were the two that I frequented the most as a tryout.
So was your first one an open mic, or was it?
No, the first one was actually a mate of mine was a promotions manager at the Castle Hotel and talked me into getting up on stage and doing a piece. So that was a bit of a sly one, but my first proper tryout was the Star and Garter in South Melbourne, which is no longer there.
So was that your first step into the creative world? That was the start of all this, basically? Yeah. And how did it go, that first gig?
I got lucky. I didn't have a death until gig number 17. I remember it.
Oh, really?
Gig number 17.
Where was that?
Aubrey. Had a shocker in Aubrey.
Not the first shocker
You're
death that's happened
not popular in Aubrey.
At least he didn't end up in a shallow grave.
Oh, God.
How long were you on stage for?
I think I was meant to do 15. It might have been 7.
And what
it was pretty ugly. It just wasn't working. And it was a room full of, I think rugby players who were determined to get on the sauce and were pretty far gone. But I'm making excuses. But yes, it was gig number 17 was my first shocker. But early on, I had a good run, and then I had a good run after that as well.
So you're thinking this is actually pretty easy,
right, yeah.
And then how did Full Frontal come about? A Vizard or someone saw you at one of those gigs or had seen you doing characters, or how did that come about?
So I got to know. I was working quite often with Jim Owen and Glenn Robbins on the stand-up circuit, and Glenn actually said to me, "You should audition for Full Frontal because they're disbanding Fast Forward and they're doing this new show. You should audition. I was like, well, I'd love to, but what do you reckon?
How do you do that?
So he arranged a meeting with Andrew Knight. I met Andrew Knight and did a kind of informal audition. I think I might have done some stuff on tape. I can't remember. And then I met him and we did some stuff together and then got the job on Full Frontal. Was one of, I guess, about 17 new cast members at the time. It seemed like
But
cast
it was
of
big
thousands.
back in the day, that is Australian sketch comedy.
I mean,
but I
and
remember
that
when you were doing Full Frontal, I was working at Channel 10, and get this, Channel 10 hired Eric to do a stand-up spot at the Channel 10 Christmas party at Como one night. You remember that?
Yes.
And I remember saying, what a doughy Channel 10 thing to do is to hire a bloke
bring
from
in
Channel
Channel
7 to entertain your own staff. And I remember
it wasn't in Albury, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was at the Como, and it was, it was hard. It was a hard gig. Because everyone, Christmas party, everyone's standing around and drinking, and they're all on the marble floors. And
Christmas parties are...
What an idea.
yeah, what a bizarre idea.
How'd I go?
You did all right.
I survived.
You survived. You survived. I reckon you pulled it shorter than you had to. But I remember thinking, A, this is a terrible place to hire a stand-up for this gig. And B, you get a bloke from Channel 7 to do it. That's how bad Channel 10
Christmas
was going
parties are notorious. I remember one of my favourite ever Christmas party for work that I've ever been to is this is almost 20 years ago, and we went and the place I worked was out in Burwood, so that was before the tram went out there, so everyone drove. So they used to put on a Friday afternoon. They said it was a Christmas party, and they had booze and everything, but no one could touch it because everyone had to drive, right? And it was 3 o'clock in the boardroom. They opened up all the side rooms.
And Burwood is the Albury of suburbia.
Yeah,
really.
so it's, and so they don't even put it on at a pub or anything, right? So they open up the boardroom, which is pretty stale. It's full bright sunlight coming in, and they put some drinks there and some food, and everyone's standing there, and there's still the boardroom table in the middle. And so sort of picture a room of 200 people all in work gear, all sober, all desperate to get out. It's the week before, and waiting for the CEO to get up and do a speech so they can all then leave. And they bring out for entertainment a belly dancer. So this poor woman has to come out.
Have you said, just a break in, have you said what kind of business this was? What was the company?
It was a quasi-government body.
Okay.
And I don't want to say who it is, but...
so a bureaucrat was in charge of this.
Yeah, it's a bureaucrat. Yeah. So you've got all these completely sober people just standing there not wanting to be there, and suddenly there's a belly dancer in bright sunshine too. Like belly dancers usually they're at a restaurant or at a nightclub or something. And so this poor woman comes out and is trying to entertain everyone, and she's trying to get various of the guys to dance with her, and so no one's wanting to do it, right? And there's mutterings of how inappropriate it is. So she then gets up on the boardroom table to sort of try and escalate it, and stands up really quickly, and above the boardroom is a metal bracket holding the projector, and she completely almost knocks herself out, does a little bit of an attempt to do a bit more belly dancing, and just collapses on the table. So for a brief moment,
this is a sketch in itself.
There's 200 people in a boardroom standing around a semi-conscious belly dancer lying on a boardroom table. And I thought, you're not going to get a worse Christmas party than this.
I'm waiting for you to say, and then the stand-up had to come out afterwards. That's usually the way it works.
Now, Eric, what other sports are you into? I mean, we know you love your Saints. We've been through the motor racing. Any other sports that you participate in or you're a big fan of?
I love my cycling. Must confess, I am one of those dudes that you ride past almost every day.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my main means of keeping fit and stuff. So nothing I follow religiously. I get to the end of the footy season, my tank's empty.
Right.
Thank goodness, and I don't like sitting on the couch. So the idea of getting into summer sports or
5 days
outside
of
cricket. Fortunately for me, F1, MotoGP, AFL, it's all in that same period, and I can the leaves can start falling, and I'm good to go for the following year. But no, not a cricket man, not a soccer man. I'll watch the occasional game of NFL. I don't mind it actually.
Yeah.
And I might try and catch a little bit of the NBL playoffs. if I'm on the right time zone. But nothing that I follow with the same fervour as the other
That's
three.
the footy.
We've been enjoying the cycling recently with the revelation that there were motors put in a lot of the bikes, and I always think with. Like for someone who's, I'll tune in and watch the big cycling races sometimes because I just love I love any sport, but it's not and it is amazing to me what goes on in those races. Like the some of them might have been, on the steroids and had a motor as well, which seems overkill.
The motor things, I mean, if you're really into your bikes, the motor thought is hilarious because if there's one thing we all love doing is picking up our bike going, how light is that?
Yeah. But what a G is this bloke is to be able to put a motor inside the frame of a push bike and not be discovered. Imagine if he put that engineering genius to something more useful.
Yeah, it is amazing. I'd love to see a physical specimen of what this thing looks like.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy one actually for my beach road run.
Everyone's Eric Bana, he's really good.
Yeah, Eric Bana,
he's come along.
Yeah. He's fit as a trout at the minute. Have a look at him.
Got an extra 30 watts. Where's that come from?
The guy that invented it, did you see the stories of all this? But the guy who invented it, he sold it to one of the professional teams years ago, and they gave him something like $3 million, which shows you the money in the sport on it. And he said, look, and they said, well, and then he came out and did a confession of it, which is not what I want if I'm buying something illegally off someone for them to then confess to it a few years later.
So now they x-ray them, don't they? They scan them.
Yeah, they're x-raying it. But they reckon there's a bunch of ones going back to the Armstrong era where they'll never be able to know. And because this was years ago, he sold it to them. So they reckon they've been in. And the way they do it is apparently it makes a small whirring noise, but you turn it on when you're in the pack. Mm-hmm. And you just...
They got the whole thing worked
it's
out.
like recovery, I guess. It's not necessarily
it's not
a
like
useful tool for attacking.
Yeah.
But it's probably 10 or 20 watts.
What they used to do is say you're on a big incline and you're in the pack, so the noise is pretty loud. You would know the noise could make actually... You just flick it on. And you still pedal, but you're basically conserving energy as everyone else is going hell for leather.
This is solid.
But anyway, they said, "Oh, morally, did you feel bad selling this thing to this team?" And he said, "Look, I didn't know what they were necessarily going to use it for.
I thought it was going to be for training rides and not for the actual race." Yeah. Why do I give him that accent? Why do I assume that's where he's from?
He's an Eastern European.
I just love that he went to he went to the trouble of engineering a secret motor and then saying, "Well, I didn't know what they were going to use it for." So, terrific stuff. Well, Eric, it's been terrific having you on.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Before you go, Eric, what's coming up next? Have you got a couple of movies in the can? What can we expect to see you in shortly? And then what are you going to be working on?
Apart from the stand-up gig.
Apart from the stand-up gig I'm doing at my house next week.
We're actually doing the Yarraville Club in a few months. We can always
I don't know if we're
get
doing
a
the
young
Yarraville Club. We
up-and-comer.
might be doing it at we might be doing it in the city, I think, the next one.
Is that the Dave O'Neill room? Are you doing Dave's room?
Yeah,
is that Yarraville?
No, he does one over in Northcote. And then there's another one he's been at the one in Yarraville.
Well,
we did that.
Up the promo, but we can always bring in a young up-and-comer to open
we're
for
doing
us.
we did last year. We did a couple. We've done a couple this year, but we did one last year in the bye week between the finals and the. You remember they interviewed that bye week for the first time before the finals, and we did a live show at the Yarraville last year. But I think we're going to do one of the theatres in the city.
So we've just asked Eric Bana what his new great upcoming movies are, and we've turned into 10 minutes about how
you know why? Speaking of Ricky Gervais, I've been watching some of his stuff recently where in the Golden Globes he just used it to shamelessly promote. Each time he got up at one of them, he just would hold up one of his DVDs. He'd say, and he'd do some odd segue and say, which is a bit like extras now on DVD. So anyway, that's the next stand-up gig. You're more than welcome
to
come
work
join
on
us
it
for that.
Okay, all right. Never know.
But what movies you got coming up?
I've just got. I'm trying to think where we're at here. I lose track of stuff here because it's out of kilter with everywhere else. But There's a movie I did with Jim Sheridan called The Secret Scripture, which I'm not sure if and when that's going to be released here. It's all, independent space. And then I just, before Christmas, did a movie called The Forgiven with Forrest Whitaker that was directed by Roland Joffe, which I'm pretty excited about, set in South Africa.
Did you have to do the accent?
I did. I played a
How hard was that to get?
African former military policeman who was quite hardcore, and we shot actually. My character's in jail, and we shot for real in Polesmore Prison in Cape Town, which is licensed to hold 1,500 people, and there were 5,500.
That would have been an eye-opener in itself, wouldn't it?
So each day I'd go to
so
work.
it was being used as a prison while you were filming.
It was an active
there.
prison, and they would give us a inverted commas disused wing, and we'd be shooting in the wing. Myself, only one other actor most times, and about 90 to 100 freshly released Polesmore prisoners who were all gang members. And every now and then during a take, we would just have to stop filming and face the walls whilst they would escort prisoners down the corridor that we were shooting. So it was it wasn't your normal day's work, eyes in the back of your head, all that sort of stuff. But, a gem of a little film, so we'll see what happens with that.
So you got the accent down pat? Was that a hard one?
I have no choice, Titus. The last time I did a film in Australia, I was playing a Hungarian migrant. So
That's right.
I can't catch a break. I need to get a gig where I get to be Australian. I think it's only happened once on Funny People.
I was about to say, when you did Funny People, there were a couple of people, geez, Eric Bana does a good Australian accent.
It is amazing. I still meet people in America who don't know that I'm Australian.
Yeah, no,
and you think when you've been doing it long enough that,
reckon.
surely, but I guess, they're not everyone's Googling you, so, which I always take as a compliment.
Do you find the accents hard to pick up, or because you always were a good mimic? You always.
Yeah. No, it's something that I've just always had to do.
You've always been good at that sort of stuff.
Is it better than Matt Damon's in Invictus?
I haven't.
Have you seen that one?
Invictus.
That's the one about the South African rugby team.
Oh,
He plays the
Invictus.
captain of
Invictus,
the-
sorry,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And he does a great job because he makes a Springbok captain seem almost likeable,
Right.
which is a huge acting challenge.
Sometimes when they're very, like the guy that I was playing in this film, it's extremely specific, and it's also period. So yeah, it's different every time. Sometimes it's more generic, but in this case, I had a very, very, very small target to aim at. So I enjoy that. It's part of the job. As I say, I just take it as a given. I'm so envious when I see actors in films speaking in their native tongue. I just want to slap them. It's just like they have no idea.
You rarely get to do
Never
it.
get to do it.
Do you get to? Are you at the stage of your career where you get to pick and choose a fair bit though, like what movies you do?
Yeah, but at the same time, you don't really get to control everything. I mean, I have full control of what I say yes to, but I don't have full control of what gets offered.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes.
So you see movies and you think, I would have loved to have done this one.
No, not really. No,
Never.
not very, very rarely.
Or more, you say, I'm glad I didn't have to do that
Yeah,
one.
there's plenty of those.
You talk about the level of fame you sort of got in Europe and America through Troy, which took you to another sort of level of recognition, I guess, walking down the street. What can you imagine? I mean, you would know far better than any of us what it's like to be, say, a Brad Pitt who you did Troy with. The sheer, not even recognition, but that
Hysteria.
of being owned by the public. That must be. I mean, there's that great level of fame that you probably got, but that whole other level. Do you want that? Would you want that?
Who could be asked? I wouldn't actually cope with that at all.
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone that's in that position does. No, I can't. I can't relate to it. Honestly, I can't relate to it any more than you could. I have a very handy, I call it a handy level of fame, where I really do get pretty much left alone. I really can't complain, especially here in Melbourne. I just really can go about my business without a problem. So, yeah.
Yeah, so in Melbourne, it'd be like, oh, there's Eric Bana. Oh, yeah, it is too. And that would be probably it. Whereas, somebody,
But it's also, I think if you dig your heels in, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Like people just know that's where you're from and that's where you live, and it's no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah.
Whereas if you were here once every 5 years, you'd probably cop it. But
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Familiarity breeds
I don't even get
contempt.
hassled at the footy. You know, like,
Oh, really? You
My,
never
my
get
seats
anyone?
are in a regular spot. I rarely get hassled at the footy. Most people in my section know me and just g'day, and yeah, it's easy as mate.
Well, Eric, it's been wonderful having you on the Variety
Thanks for
Hour.
having me.
We really appreciate you dropping in, and
I feel enlightened. I feel I've learned something.
do you?
Yeah, I don't know what, but
You probably not. When you listen back to it, like we all will this afternoon.
At least when people ask you in the future, what was the low point of your career, you'll now have an answer.
No, this has been like a walk down memory lane. Steve hasn't brought up all the old Serge has not brought up all the old skeletons in the closet.
Well, see, it's
Although
imp-
I do remember the time.
Here we go.
Well,
This is what I came for.
this is what you came for. We've cracked quite a few jokes over the last couple of years about Robert Allenby, the golfer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the time we're doing the Eric Live Tonight show? We went to Huntingdale Golf Course because Tiger Woods was going to be the next big golfer in the world, and he was playing there. And Eric, you were dressed up as Tim Webster from Sports Tonight, and you had
arguably your greatest role.
Yeah, arguably your greatest role. You had the hair, you had all the makeup as Tim Webster, and we were there and we had no idea what we were going to do. And we were just going to try and make this up as we went along. And I went up to Robert Allenby on the practice green and explained what we were there for.
I'm sweating.
And I'm with Eric Bana. And he goes, I really like Eric. I said, that's him over there. He's dressed up as fucking Tim Webster. And I said, could we do a thing where Tim Webster confuses you for Tiger Woods? And he goes, yeah, no worries. Come in here. So he drags us in. We've got a little film crew with us. And we're into a room where they do all the press conference bits. And we're not allowed in there. The people from the Masters have been telling you can't go here, you can't do there. And Robert Allenby goes, hey, I'm the reigning PGA champion. We're going in. And we shot this whole thing. And for all the stuff that Robert Allenby's trouble he's got into, I thought the only time I've ever run into him, he was an absolute beauty.
He helped you out.
Yeah, he helped us out.
What a great idea.
Oh,
Can you
the
remember
days.
that at all?
Vague. I do remember. The only thing I remember, I don't remember the questions. I remember being at the golf, and
Yeah.
I remember being in character for something in a costume, but I can't remember who. But
It was Tim Webster.
And I remember it being guerrilla style, as everything was back then.
Because then when we got back to the office, and Steve Vizard, remember saying, did you get anything? Did you get anything? I said, well, I think so. We bailed up Robert Allenby, and we had Tim Webster kept calling him Tiger. And Steve Vizard, I remember looking and goes, anything else? Well, that's pretty much, that was about it. But
So you didn't get Tiger though?
Oh, no, that was the whole point. Is that
No, I get it.
and just one more while we're at it. Do you remember we had that guy John Wayne Bobbitt on your
Yes,
Tonight
I
Show?
do.
The guy who had his old fella cut off?
Yeah, by his wife.
Yeah,
Being interviewed by Poiter.
interviewed by the Porter character. And he was the dumbest bloke you've ever met, this guy. He didn't get
Really?
one of the jokes. But the only thing that happened after the show that night, we were all having a beer in Eric's dressing room, and John Wayne was in there, and it hadn't been great because he
I love
was-
that John Wayne Bobbitt. It's
Yeah.
such a great name.
And we're all standing around a bit uncomfortably just having a couple of beers until John Wayne goes, do you want to see it? And we were going, oh, shit, yeah. Everybody in the room.
I think I left the room at that stage.
No, he's pulled it out, and every cast member wanted to have a look. And that was the highlight of that week.
God, imagine that was
Just
like
stick
your
with me,
calling.
mate.
Yeah.
Stick with me.
Yeah.
Imagine that was your calling card. That is what you were known for.
Interviewing John Wayne Bobbitt as
No.
Poiter.
But him doing that, I mean, like him, that's
pretty
his
special.
At that point, did you ever think you were about to do a film with Steven Spielberg?
That was the point at which I knew my
That's
career
what
was headed in the
Stephen
right
saw.
direction.
He watched Peter interviewing him and said,
See, thank God for these failures. Had that show been a success, I'd have been screwed.
Titus and I were talking before you got here, and he asked me, he said, how do you know Eric? And I said, look, I worked briefly for him on his
because whenever Serge
short-lived
says
Tonight
these
show.
these stories, until now, I'd always thought he was just lying, because he drops names and I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I'm a shocking name dropper.
But now.
But Matt Damon told me that nobody likes a name dropper, So, but we were actually talking beforehand, and Titus said, you know what, if that Tonight Show had been a massive
Well, because
spectacular
it was up against
hit,
the footy show, wasn't it?
yeah, so it had no
So
chance.
it was the scheduling as much as
probably
one
the
of
best
those.
thing.
Oh, no, it was probably the fact that it was quite shite as well. I mean,
And
it
you
was- It was like, because what happened was we got to the end of Full Frontal, and then they said, Eric and Sean go away and do a 1 hour special, which we did. And then I went, well, that went really well. How about doing a Tonight Show? I'm like, well, that's not really what I did. I was doing sketch. So to their credit, after that spectacular failure, they turned around and said, well, what is it you want to do? And I said, well, I want to do what I was originally going to do, which is this sketch comedy show. And they then gave me a lot of time to go away, and I think I had about 9 months to write the thing. I had the whole thing written before we shot a single sketch of the next show, which was just the Eric show, the sketch comedy show. So, yeah. Anyway.
But because I was thinking this way, if that had have worked and like the ratings wise, and they'd have kept it around, you might never have done that for another 3-4 years, and who knows what could happen.
Exactly.
The opportunities and the
well, that's the
films
thing in life. Sometimes something happens to you and you think this is the worst thing ever, or this is a disaster.
We say that at the podcast every week.
Yeah, except we're not having the uptick.
We haven't found our chopper yet.
No one's. Unfortunately, you can't get cancelled from a podcast.
And when you make it yourself.
No, it's all free. So do you think that sometimes? Is that one of those moments where you go...
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Because, back at the time when the Tonight Show failed, I think it was the point at which my contract was ended. So they didn't really... They couldn't then keep me forever. So I think we then rolled it over to do the series, which was just 6 1-hour shows. And then I was a free man. So... And I was completely burnt out of comedy by then, so I was happy to walk away and...
But did you have anything... Like when you walked away at that point... Did you have any idea what you were going to do next?
No, I had auditioned for Chopper, but we didn't really know what was going to happen. So you did have a rough
idea of there might be somewhere, hopefully.
I just wanted a change. And I was still doing stand-up. And I was still doing stand-up, actually, even after I did Chopper, believe it or not. So that sort of kept me going because I didn't have a job. I was literally, my wife was pregnant and about to give birth, and I was out doing stand-up still. So, it all sort of happened around that time.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, once again, thank you for being on the
Thanks for having us.
And go Saints.
Go Saints.